What happens when a global superstar walks onto a live daytime talk show and refuses to stay quiet? Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The studio audience is already buzzing as the cameras settle. The hosts are mid-segment, transitioning from a lighter topic to something more serious. The atmosphere feels normal at first, upbeat, conversational, until the introduction changes the tone. Please welcome Dwayne Johnson. Applause fills the room as Dwayne walks out, smiling, waving, shaking hands. He looks relaxed, dressed sharply but casually, taking his seat across from the panel. Whoopi Goldberg leans back in her chair, offering a polite nod and a welcoming smile. "Good morning," one of the co-hosts says warmly. "We're glad you're here." "Thank you for having me," Dwayne replies. His voice is calm, measured. "I appreciate it." The applause fades, and the conversation begins naturally. They talk about his latest project, his production work, and his involvement in community initiatives. The tone stays friendly. Whoopi asks about leadership and responsibility. "You've become not just an actor, but a business leader," she says. "How do you decide what messages you want to put out there?" Dwayne nods thoughtfully. "I try to stay consistent. I believe in accountability. I believe in showing up. And I believe in letting people see growth." There's murmuring from the audience, positive, supportive. Another host jumps in with a follow-up question about public expectations. Dwayne answers carefully, choosing his words. Everything feels balanced. Then the conversation shifts slightly. One of the panelists references recent cultural debates surrounding celebrity influence and public statements. The tone changes, subtly at first. Some people feel that public figures should speak more directly about social and political issues, the host says. "Do you think entertainers have that responsibility?" Dwayne leans forward a bit. "I think we have influence, but responsibility looks different for everyone. For me, it's about action more than speeches." Whoopi interjects gently. "But action can mean using your platform to speak out. Silence can also send a message." The audience reacts with scattered applause. Dwayne pauses, listening carefully. "I understand that perspective. I just believe not every conversation needs to happen publicly. Sometimes leadership is quieter." The studio grows noticeably quieter. Not tense, but focused. Whoopi nods, but doesn't immediately agree. Quiet leadership is fine. But when you have millions listening, sometimes people want clarity. A brief laugh comes from the audience, not mocking, just acknowledging the debate. Dwayne smiles slightly, but his expression tightens. Clarity doesn't always mean taking sides on everything. It means being consistent in your values. One of the co-hosts tries to keep the conversation balanced. "So you're saying your values guide you, but you don't feel pressured to comment on every issue?" "Exactly," Dwayne replies. Whoopi leans in. Her tone is calm but firm. "Let me push that a little. Because when issues affect communities, especially marginalized communities, some people feel celebrities have a platform that can amplify important messages." There's applause again, stronger this time. Dwayne listens carefully. He nods once. "I respect that view. Truly. But I also think that if someone isn't educated on every detail, it's better not to speak just to be heard." That statement lands differently. The audience reacts with mixed sounds, some applause, some murmurs. Whoopi's expression shifts slightly. Not anger, but seriousness. "So you're saying it's better to stay quiet than risk being wrong?" "I'm saying it's better to be informed," Dwayne replies evenly. "And if I'm not informed enough, I'd rather learn first." The energy in the room tightens just a little. Not dramatic, but noticeable. Live television always carries that edge when opinions differ. One of the co-hosts gently steps in. "That's actually an interesting point. But sometimes people feel that waiting can delay progress." Dwayne responds calmly. "Progress also requires accuracy. Otherwise, it can create confusion." Whoopi crosses her hands, listening intently. But confusion can happen even when people say nothing. A brief pause. The audience grows quiet. Dwayne looks directly at Whoopi now. "I don't disagree. I just believe every voice should be used responsibly. And sometimes responsibility means restraint." The word restraint hangs in the air. A few audience members clap. Others remain silent. Whoopi responds with steady composure. "Restraint is fine. But when people look to leaders, they expect engagement." Dwayne nods, but his tone becomes more assertive. Engagement doesn't have to mean public debate. It can mean private work, donations, community building, action behind the scenes. That statement triggers noticeable applause. One co-host smiles and says, "Okay, that's fair." But Whoopi isn't finished. She leans slightly forward. "I just want to make sure we're not confusing discretion with avoidance." The room feels tighter now. Not hostile, but engaged. Dwayne's expression remains steady. "And I want to make sure we're not confusing silence with indifference." The audience reacts loudly, applause this time. Some standing slightly in their seats. The exchange grows sharper but stays respectful. The hosts begin overlapping slightly, managing timing, a common live TV dynamic. One co-host laughs lightly to ease tension. "This is why we love live television." The audience laughs with relief. Whoopi smiles faintly. "Well, it's good conversation. That's what we're here for." Dwayne nods. "Absolutely. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to talk." There's a brief moment where everyone relaxes again. But the debate hasn't fully resolved. One host asks, "So if there was a major issue tomorrow, something you felt strongly about, would you speak out?" Dwayne considers carefully. "If I felt informed and compelled, yes. But I wouldn't rush. I'd want to understand the impact fully." Whoopi replies, "That's reasonable. But sometimes people feel urgency." "I understand urgency," he says. "I just believe urgency without clarity can create unintended consequences." The audience reacts again, some applause, some thoughtful silence. The tension isn't explosive. It's the kind of live television disagreement that feels real because neither side is shouting. It's measured, controlled, honest. A brief pause follows. The hosts glance at each other, signaling a shift. "We're going to take a quick break," one announces. "When we come back, we'll continue this conversation." The camera begins to pull back slightly as applause fills the studio again. Not for conflict, but for engagement. Dwayne smiles, turning toward Whoopi. She extends her hand slightly across the table in a friendly gesture. He shakes it. "Good discussion," she says. He replies, "I appreciate it." The segment ends with the kind of respectful disagreement that only live talk shows can deliver. Where personalities meet, perspectives clash, but professionalism holds everything together. As the cameras fade to commercial, the audience continues murmuring, clearly energized by the exchange. And when they return, the conversation is expected to continue, with emotions slightly elevated, perspectives sharpened, and everyone ready to see where the discussion leads next. The show returns from commercial break, and the studio energy feels slightly different, more alert, more aware that the conversation has momentum now. The audience applauds as the cameras settle back on the panel. "Welcome back," one of the hosts says. "We're here with Dwayne Johnson, and we were in the middle of a really thoughtful discussion before the break." Whoopi nods. "Yes, we were talking about responsibility and how public figures choose to use their platforms." Dwayne sits upright, hands folded calmly. "And I'm happy to continue. I think it's important." There's a small round of applause. One host leans in. Some viewers online were already reacting during the break. A lot of them are saying they appreciate your perspective on being informed before speaking. The audience reacts with approving sounds. Whoopi responds thoughtfully. And others are saying that sometimes waiting can feel like hesitation when people are looking for leadership. The tone is steady, not heated but focused. Dwayne nods. "I respect that. But leadership isn't just about speaking publicly. It's about consistency. It's about showing up in communities, listening, and doing the work." A host follows up quickly. "So do you feel misunderstood sometimes when people expect more public commentary?" He exhales slightly, thinking, "Sometimes. But I also understand why expectations exist. I don't take that personally." Whoopi tilts her head slightly. "That's fair. But let me ask you something directly. When you say you prefer restraint, is there ever a moment where you feel silence could be misinterpreted?" The audience quiets. Dwayne looks directly at her. "Yes, that's always a possibility. But I can't make decisions based on fear of misinterpretation. I have to make them based on my values." There's applause, strong and sustained. One of the co-hosts smiles. "Okay, but values can include speaking out, right?" "Absolutely," he replies immediately. "And for some people, that's their calling. I just don't think it's the only way to contribute." Whoopi responds without raising her voice. "No one said it's the only way. But in moments of crisis, people often look to those with large platforms for reassurance." Dwayne leans slightly forward. "And reassurance can also come from action, from partnerships, from long-term investment in solutions." A few audience members clap enthusiastically. Another host jumps in to prevent repetition. "Let's talk about something specific. If a fan asked you tomorrow what you stand for, what would you say? He answers without hesitation. Integrity, accountability, growth, respect. The audience applauds again. Whoopi smiles faintly. Those are strong words. They're lived words, he replies. There's a brief silence, not uncomfortable, just reflective. Then one host brings up the idea of celebrity influence in the digital age. Social media makes everything immediate. People expect instant responses. Dwayne nods. That's true, but immediacy doesn't always equal quality. The audience reacts with agreement sounds. Whoopi responds carefully. But immediacy can also be powerful. When people feel seen quickly, it can matter. I agree, he says. But I try to balance speed with substance. The conversation is still controlled, but now it feels deeper. The kind of discussion that keeps viewers leaning forward. One host glances at the audience. You can feel the engagement in the room. There's light laughter. Then Whoopi shifts slightly in her chair. Let me ask this. Do you ever feel pressured by expectations from fans, media, or industry peers to say things that don't align with how you operate? The question draws attention. Dwayne pauses longer this time. Yes, he says honestly. That pressure exists. But I don't want to perform opinions. I want to stand behind what I truly understand. The audience applauds again, some people clearly responding positively to that transparency. A host tries to bridge the gap. So, what would you say to people who think silence equals avoidance? He responds calmly. I'd say look at the full picture. Look at my work, my partnerships, the communities I invest in. That tells you more about my priorities than a single comment ever could. Whoopi nods slowly. That's a fair argument. For a moment, it feels like the conversation may settle into agreement. But then one of the co-hosts reads a viewer comment aloud. Some viewers are saying this debate shows exactly why talk shows matter, because different perspectives can sit at the same table. The audience applauds. Whoopi smiles slightly. That's true. Dwayne agrees. I think this is healthy. The tone softens. The intensity shifts from confrontation to reflection. A host asks, so despite your differences in perspective, would you say you both agree on the importance of accountability? Both nod. Yes, Whoopi says. Absolutely, Dwayne adds. The audience responds with applause. There's a brief laugh from the panel, a moment of relief. One host says, that's what live TV is about. Real conversations. Whoopi turns toward Dwayne. I appreciate that you didn't shut down the discussion. He replies sincerely. And I appreciate being challenged respectfully. The studio mood feels lighter now. The earlier tension hasn't disappeared, but it has transformed into engagement. As they move toward the next segment, the hosts begin transitioning topics, thanking Dwayne for his time. Before wrapping the segment, one host says, we've had a thoughtful debate today. Applause fills the room again. Dwayne stands, shaking hands with each host. When he reaches Whoopi, they exchange a brief smile. Good conversation, she says again. Thank you, he replies. The audience continues applauding as he waves and exits the stage area. The cameras slowly shift back to the panel, who begin discussing the exchange in a reflective tone, noting how respectful disagreement can model constructive dialogue. The segment closes with the hosts summarizing the key themes: responsibility, leadership, and the many ways influence can be used, publicly and privately. The applause fades as the show transitions to its next topic, but the conversation lingers in the room. And online, the reaction is just beginning to build, as viewers start sharing clips, opinions, and their own perspectives about what they just witnessed live on air. The show continues, but the energy in the studio still carries what just happened. The hosts are discussing audience feedback, and the camera briefly shows Dwayne seated again after returning to the stage for a follow-up segment. One host says, we've been getting messages during the break. A lot of people appreciate that this didn't turn into a shouting match. The audience applauds lightly. Whoopi nods. That's important. Disagreement doesn't have to mean disrespect. Dwayne leans forward slightly. I agree. I think when conversations stay respectful, they become productive. There's another round of applause. Another host reads a viewer comment. Some people say they wish more public figures approached topics the way you did, focusing on preparation and understanding before speaking. Dwayne responds calmly. I'm grateful for that perspective. But I also want to be clear. I'm not saying other approaches are wrong. I'm just explaining mine. Whoopi turns to him. And I respect that. But I want to clarify something for viewers. When I speak about public responsibility, I'm not asking anyone to comment on everything. I'm talking about moments where communities are asking for visibility. The audience responds with applause again. Dwayne nods. And that's a fair distinction. Visibility matters. I just think visibility can take different forms. One of the hosts jumps in to keep the tone balanced. It sounds like both of you are actually closer in agreement than disagreement. The audience laughs softly. Whoopi smiles. Possibly. Dwayne smiles too. Possibly. The room relaxes slightly. Then the conversation shifts towards social media reactions. A host mentions that clips from the first half of the segment are already circulating online. You know it's live when it's trending before the show even ends, she says with a laugh. The audience reacts with cheers. Whoopi looks at Dwayne. That's the world we live in now. Everything is immediate. He responds. And that's why I try to stay measured. Once something is out there, it spreads fast. A host asks, have you ever felt misunderstood because of how quickly conversations move online? Yes, he says. Context can get lost. There's applause. Whoopi adds, context is everything. The conversation becomes less about disagreement and more about media dynamics. One host says, this is actually a great example of how dialogue should work. You didn't agree on every point, but you kept listening. The audience applauds again. Dwayne replies, listening is the key. You can't have a real conversation without it. Whoopi nods. Agreed. For the first time since the debate began, the tone feels fully collaborative. The hosts begin asking lighter follow-up questions about upcoming projects, behind-the-scenes production work, and how Dwayne balances business responsibilities. The energy shifts toward standard talk show flow. But during a brief moment of transition, one host asks, do you think this conversation today will change how people view your approach? Dwayne pauses thoughtfully. Maybe, but I hope it simply gives people more clarity about where I'm coming from. Whoopi responds, and that's all any of us can ask for, clarity. The audience applauds warmly. There's a noticeable sense in the room that something meaningful happened. Not dramatic, but substantive. The panel moves toward wrapping up the segment. One host says, we really appreciate you being open today. Dwayne replies, thank you for creating space for it. The audience claps loudly. As the segment nears its end, the hosts briefly summarize the discussion for viewers at home, emphasizing respectful disagreement, responsibility, and the many ways public influence can be expressed. Whoopi adds, it's okay to disagree. That's part of conversation. Dwayne nods in agreement. And it's okay to have different approaches. The applause grows again. The camera captures audience members smiling, some still talking quietly among themselves. The hosts thank Dwayne once more, and he stands to exit for the final time in this segment. He shakes hands across the table. The interaction with Whoopi is cordial and steady. No lingering tension, just mutual acknowledgement. As he walks off stage, applause continues. The panel transitions into the next topic, but briefly references the exchange as an example of live television at its best. Real-time conversation without scripts. The audience remains engaged, still reacting to what they witnessed. And while the show moves forward, clips of the discussion begin circulating beyond the studio, setting the stage for reactions that will unfold after the broadcast ends. The final segment of the show shifts into wrap-up mode, but the conversation from earlier is still clearly on everyone's mind. The hosts briefly reference how the exchange between Dwayne Johnson and Whoopi Goldberg reflected the kind of dialogue the show aims to encourage: direct, respectful, and live. One of the co-hosts says, that's why people tune in. You never know exactly how a conversation will evolve. The audience applauds. Whoopi nods. And that's okay. Conversations should evolve. Dwayne smiles from his seat. I agree. That's how understanding grows. There's a warm round of applause, not just for agreement, but for the tone that held throughout the discussion. The hosts begin discussing the audience reaction inside the studio. Several audience members are briefly asked how they felt watching the debate unfold live. One audience member says, it was refreshing to see disagreement without hostility. Another adds, it felt real. The crowd applauds again. One host transitions to what's happening outside the studio. Clips from today's conversation are already being shared online. Viewers are discussing both perspectives. While they avoid exaggeration, the panel acknowledges that live talk show moments often spark immediate social media response. Hashtags begin trending as viewers comment on Dwayne's emphasis on preparation and Whoopi's focus on public responsibility. The reaction appears divided but engaged, some praising restraint, others emphasizing the importance of outspoken leadership. The hosts summarize it simply. People are talking. Dwayne responds, and if people are thinking, that's a good thing. Whoopi agrees. Dialogue is healthy. The atmosphere is calm now. No tension, just reflection. The panel briefly reviews key points from the discussion. The role of public figures, the balance between action and speech, and how leadership can take different forms. They emphasize that disagreement does not mean disrespect. As the show moves toward closing, one of the hosts thanks Dwayne again for participating in such an open conversation. Not everyone is comfortable being challenged live, she says. Dwayne replies honestly, if we're going to have real discussions, we should be willing to listen and respond in real time. The audience applauds loudly. Whoopi adds, that's how you model constructive disagreement. The final applause builds as the hosts begin thanking viewers at home for watching live. They encourage continued respectful conversation beyond the studio. Before the credits roll, each host shares a brief closing thought. Whoopi says, we don't have to agree on everything to sit at the same table. Dwayne nods, and we can learn from each other even when we see things differently. The audience stands and applauds as the segment concludes. After the show, backstage interviews capture Dwayne briefly speaking to production staff and posing for photos. He thanks the crew and reiterates that he appreciated the dialogue. Meanwhile, the hosts continue discussing the segment in the green room, reflecting on how the exchange stayed grounded despite strong opinions. Outside the studio, social media platforms are active. Viewers post clips, comment on quotes from both sides, and debate the meaning of the discussion. Some highlight Dwayne's point about informed speech and restraint. Others echo Whoopi's argument about visibility and responsibility. The conversation spreads quickly, but without signs of backlash turning personal. Most discussions focus on the ideas themselves. Entertainment outlets begin publishing short summaries of the exchange, describing it as a thoughtful on-air debate rather than a confrontation. Comment sections show mixed opinions, but largely respectful engagement. Later that evening, short video clips circulate across platforms, capturing the most discussed moments. Viewers replay the segments where both Dwayne and Whoopi clearly articulated their positions. The respectful tone becomes the defining takeaway for many. Back at home, viewers continue sharing reactions, some saying they appreciated seeing disagreement handled calmly. Others say they hope more public conversations look like this. Open, direct, and without interruption turning into conflict. The show's producers later described the episode as a strong example of live television. Unpredictable but controlled, expressive but respectful. By the end of the day, the segment has sparked widespread discussion. Not because of controversy, but because of engagement. The audience inside the studio felt it. The viewers at home felt it. And online, people continue to share their opinions. And now it's your turn. Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories.